I always look back at my dad's working life. He worked at what was the old Moston Brick as a joiner. He spent a lot of his working life in a sort of semi-workshop factory environment. And as he worked his way up through the ranks in life, he eventually became a joinery manager for a company called Pellows in Oldham. And as he developed through his life, Pellows closed and he moved on and he bought a shop on Moston Lane. It was a hardware shop that used to be owned by a couple, it used to be Feinbergs. And that was sort of like taking him out of an environment, because he'd never been in retail, he'd never done any shop work. So he used to run the shop with my gran. He spent 20 odd years doing that before he retired. But that was when Moston Lane, or the Lane, was the place to go to shop. Most of the shops were, owned. They weren't sort of franchises or anything like that. You had every type of shop you could think of along there. And of course, when Asda came along, the Lane suffered. So if the time was right, my dad moved on and he went to retirement in Fleetwood. So there was clothes shops on Moston Lane. People remember Parker's and places like that. There was a hen house, one of the first sort of chicken rotisserie places. There was still Gosling's. Gosling's fish shop was still there, and there was just like them. They had a market, an indoor market. You still had a market at Harper Hay, which has managed to survive even with Asda because it's right next to it. My gran used to work at shops along the lane. She worked at the chemist down the bottom end of Harper Hay. Most people I knew worked locally. The big factories in the area and the Mather and Platts of this world, the Ferrantis and British Aerospaces, must have employed about maybe 10,000 people. And the majority of them are probably within 10 miles of the site. Now there's nothing of those factories left at all, I don't think. I think Mather and Platt may still have a foundry somewhere, but they changed to wormholds, and obviously the companies that were household names at the time in this area. If you went in a pub, you'd bet your life 2 or 3 people worked at either of those factories. If you had any family, you had family members who probably worked at either of those factories. And it seems strange now that there's apart from what you could call historical records, and the people who work there who still have obviously memories of the same as I'm saying now, that they'll remember all these things, that you clocked on, you clocked off, you joined the union. There were closed shops, which I used to have to go and pay my union dues at the Moston Labour Club. No green card, you didn't work then. So that was another strange, when you come out of the union environment. I did have a short spell as a shop steward. The trade union movement within the factories was pretty much solid as a rock then. I think there was an underswell of people who didn't like closed shops, but the closed shop system worked because the qualifications people had to get the card guaranteed that you had served your time. So an apprentice who would have to do a 4-year apprentice and go through the apprentice ranks as a trade union member to get the green card, which was good for the employers in the way, because they knew if they were employing somebody and they had a green card, they'd done a full year apprenticeship. And obviously apprenticeships went to, one of the things that got cut over the years. Ferranti training school, when I went into it, had there was about 120 people started in the actual training school. It was a city and guilds base, but you did what they call an ITB training, which was training on the job. So I got certificates to prove I'd done the the training, the ITB training in the factory, and a City and Guild certificate to prove I'd done the college work, which, you know, was a standard, really. You know, it was a benchmark. I mean, I really don't know how they judge people's credentials these days, but certainly in the engineering environment, you could guarantee the guy probably stood next to you done the same level of apprenticeships, which I think the companies, even though they weren't overly keen on unions, I'm pretty sure that the fact they could go out and employ anybody and virtually guarantee they could do the job probably made like a personnel officers, as they used to be called, life a lot easier. So, and, you know, a questionable CV would probably have not got through in them days. Really, that's, in a nutshell, my sort of working life, and reminiscing about factory life. You know, the one of the weird, strange things about factory life was nicknames. A guy who used to be very interested in birds, he was Dick the Wagger. He was also the guy who used to work a lot of overtime, the vicar. You know, there was all sorts of weird and wonderful names, and there was a guy, and they used to call him Big Bill, and his name was Eric. But he just got a nickname of Big Bill. His name wasn't even Bill, but he just got you know, and then everybody called him Big Bill. You know, it was just a strange environment, really, but it was an environment that worked at the time. It's probably condemned to the past in a way, because I suppose in the world of modern technology, it would be considered archaic. I mean, one of the first actual exposures I had to technology before the zone phone, they had a machine for loading circuit boards, which were previously done by hand. It was incredible to watch it. It was just, you know, the components came in at one end and the boards came out the other end loaded, went through a soldering machine and came out the other end, whereas prior to that, you'd maybe have 20 girls sat around benches soldering resistors and capacitors and transformers onto little circuit boards. So that was the first step into, like, when I started to realise that technology was coming, and then the computerisation came in. We used to spend a lot of time in the drawing office on, you know, getting drawings marked up and things changed, and we worked on quality for a while. When they got their first CAD machine, you know, it was like, you know, how many of these draftsmen can we get rid of, really, because this machine does the job for them, you know. And it was just like, you could see in the early stages then where this was probably going to go, because most factory environments now that make circuit boards, I bet there's only about 10 people working them. You know, most of it's all automated. And that's when the first sort of exposure to automation came in. But there was always an element of manual side of job. When we worked at Ericsson's, they sent us out to learn about installation. It was nearly everything to do with the installation was physical. It was done by a person. The amount of time that they used to spend with cables, dragging cables around, running cables around. They did have a nickname. They used to call them cable monkeys. And they literally used to walk and pull cables for miles and miles all day. In a big exchange in Manchester, you might have 120, 130 metre cable run. So the actual, you know, although the clever stuff's done on the computers, the actual putting it in was all down to manual work and the skill of the senior installer to set the exchange in the right position. So there was always going to be, obviously, as fibre optic came in and other types of systems came in, the need for cables was well, you're still going to have them, but it was a bit of a weird, you know, you see everything progressing forward, but then you go and see that there's certain things that machines can't do. So you get to sort of a point where, you know, yeah, you design it on the computer, you produce your drawings on the CAD, you do your ordering on the computer, you send all your information out to BT by electronic mail or whatever. But when you actually see what you've designed, there's still 15 to 20 people involved in actually physically doing the work. Even though when you see the technological side of life and, you know, the things you can do with communications now, you know, an exchange is probably, you know, a tenth of the size of what it was. But you still need the expertise of hands-on people to actually do things. And I think that's part of driven by when you learn a skill, you know, even if you're a fitter, I was classed as a fitter wireman, you always do have an appreciation of the fact that working with your hands is a bit of a pleasurable occupation in a way, because you actually can create something. I think a lot of people now would benefit from having hands-on experience, because it's a pretty much dead trade now, to be honest with you. And like mining and like other things, you know, it's never ever going to come back. So if somebody remembers, or this jogs anybody's memories, I'm sure everybody will have a story to tell at times in factories. One thing about it, that the people were really, you know, you always met good people. They were always very friendly. There was always a good environment. You know, that's the only thing I can say about most places I've worked. You know, the companies might not be the best in the world, although I didn't experience any particularly bad companies. But the people who tended to work there, because of the camaraderie and the fact that you were with them in enclosed environments, like in clean air rooms in Ferranti's, you'd be sat next to the same people for 40 hours a week in the same environment. So, you know, not everybody got on, but it sort of made you into a more, I think, a friendly type of person, because it was a friendly environment. I think we probably don't get that now so much. I've not worked in that type of environment for a long time, but looking at the way the world goes, I would have thought that you wouldn't get the same level of people who had to get on with people and I spent 5 years in one department with virtually the same people, because, like I say, the workforce didn't really change that much. You know, you knew when you went in the morning who you'd be sat next to, you knew what you were doing. And I suppose that's a comfort in a way, because, you know, nowadays, if those jobs were there now, you'd have a lot of kids who would probably have a more secure future, have a bit more, you know, appreciation of life, and have more life skills. Because one thing it did teach you was life skills, how to get on with people, how to, you know, just get up in the morning, out of bed, and go do something for 8 hours a day.